The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, at least within the United States, is largely known as a white community, and with good reason. However, most of recent converts, both in the United States as well as in the hemisphere, North and South America, have largely come from Spanish-speaking communities. These Latina and Latino Mormons have carved out their own space within a predominantly white and patriarchal church. In some ways, the Latter-day Saint experience in America in recent decades is very similar to American Catholicism, in which an institution with deep roots and some racial hierarchical problems is reckoning with the fact that so many of its members, especially their new converts, come from Hispanic communities. What are the resulting lived experiences like? How do these Latina and Latino Mormons exercise their religiosity, claim a sense of self, and even try to address systematic injustices? We're fortunate to have a brand new book that addresses those very questions. Dr. Suhey Vega's new Mormon Barrio, Latino Belonging in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, just out with New York University Press this week. I want to highlight and celebrate this new book. So in this video, I'm going to introduce the work and its background and main arguments. I'll then interview Dr. Vega, where she was very kind to answer some of my questions, and then I'll provide a bit of my own analysis and why I think this book is so significant. This is an important and moving story, and so it's necessary to take it into account when understanding modern Mormonism. But before I get to the book's contents, just a reminder that if you enjoy this type of nerdy content in which we talk about scholarly contributions to understanding our modern world, the history that came before us, and the context in which we now live, especially with focus on religion, politics, and culture, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. I do deep dives on topics every Monday, I connect the past to the present on Wednesdays, and on Fridays I peel back the curtains and talk about the scholar's craft, including interviews with authors like the one I'm doing today. And if you want to give back to this channel, you can become a member, where for a nominal fee, you get early access to the videos, you get little icons next to your name when you leave comments, and you can know that you are helping support this scholar-driven project. I'm so grateful for the many of you who have taken that plunge, and I'm grateful for anyone else who will consider it. I also recommend subscribing to my free Kit newsletter. I send out these newsletter broadcasts every other week or so that have links and videos and updates and all these activities. And you can also follow me on different social media platforms, my public pages that have supplemental videos that go along with what I discuss here. All right, all that business out of the way, let's get back to the new book. Dr. Suhey Vega is an associate professor of women and gender studies at Arizona State University. She's an author of a previous book, Latino Heartland of Borders and Belonging in the Midwest. And she became interested in this project when she got to know several Latina Mormons who broke the stereotypes of Mormonism with which she was familiar. She was struck by how they were able to create such strong and sincere sisterhoods despite their substantial work commitments, family demands, and the white patriarchal institution into which they were baptized. And while her research focused on the Mesa, Arizona community, a community that's quite significant, as I and Dr. Vega will get to, she also interviewed people in the Midwest as well as in Utah. She conducted at least 48 substantial ethnographic interviews around 2014 in the wake of Arizona's SB 1070, a draconian law that forced Hispanic residents to show their papers, but also used sociological and historical material to flesh out that larger story. And her thesis is quite provocative and moving. She tells the history of the Latino community in Mesa and its historical foundations, that it predates Spanish-speaking branches in Salt Lake City, and the Mesa Temple ends up being the first temple to have Spanish language temple rituals. She also focused on what draws Latina and Latino Mormon converts to Mormonism, finding that a majority of them come from Catholic backgrounds, and that Mormonism spoke to a sense of personal fulfillment that they felt was lacking, even as they are redefining conceptions of the family that are typically at the heart of these conversion narratives at the institutional level. She also talks about how they created these ethno-religious communities within Spanish-speaking Spanish-speaking wards that featured vibrant cultures and them trying to retain and even strengthen their ethnic identities, even as they have tension with the white-centered patriarchal institution of the LDS Church. She also has a very powerful chapter on Latina sisterhood and how the workload in these relief societies of Spanish-speaking congregations provided both the fulfillment and the chances for service that build those communities in ways that you actually don't find in English-speaking congregations and the majority of white membership. And finally, she talks about political activism, especially how these Latina and Latino communities responded to SB 1070 in the 2010s. That's enough background. Let's get to my interview with Dr. Vega. I am now pleased to be joined by the author of the hour, Dr. Suhey Vega. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's dig in at a very basic point. Why is it important for people who want to understand Mormonism to know about the Spanish-speaking LDS communities in Mesa, Arizona?
Well, I think theologically speaking, it makes physical or brings physical reality to the Book of Mormon's kind of storyline, and also provides the history of the Mormon prophecy of uniting the Lamanites and the Nephites. But I think less theologically and more like experientially, Mesa provides a significant Spanish or Spanish-speaking LDS membership history. Not only has the ward, wards, multiple. It started with one and there's a lot more. It's been around for over 100 years. In fact, I want to say 108 years it's been around. Also, Mesa, for many of us that know, provided the first temple that offered Spanish endowments. There were excursions and Lamanite conferences there. And they were only there for decades. So a lot of LDS members that are Spanish speaking have memories of either coming to the temple to do endowments or coming to, youth conferences here. And then for me, more particularly, it provided a snapshot of those tensions that occur when politics enter the sanctuary or the meeting house, and how, LDS members of different political backgrounds dealt with some of the tensions on the anti-immigration bills.
Yeah, and I was your own emotional response to that is relevant because I was struck by how much you insert yourself into the story, narrating how you are interviewing these people, your responses to your actions, almost showing your own detective work, your own Sherlock Holmes and ethnographic research. How did you decide to place yourself within that story? And I recognize that the disciplinary conventions are a bit different here, but I still find it so moving in how it's structured like that.
So first and foremost, I didn't want to overshadow the stories, the history, the narratives of actual LDS members. And so that's an important point. The first thing I wanted to always do is to respect and bring forward the viewpoints of active and inactive Latino saints, and be respectful of what they said to me, right? And so I wanted to prioritize that first and foremost. But there's an important move in anthropology, as you mentioned, our disciplinary backgrounds, that regards the importance of reflexivity and decolonizing our methods as a really important part of a modern day anthropology. Really, it was developed in the 80s. So it's itself quite, been around for a while. But yeah, so we as anthropologists doing this kind of work have to be reflexive of the power dynamics and position that we hold as humans in the social science exchange. And so being constantly aware of that as you conduct research, but as a writer and as a never Mormon, by the way, I should state that I'm not LDS, never have been. I wanted to make my role as a learner very, very apparent, as I learned from the community, and then guide readers, especially those that aren't familiar with the LDS background, guide readers along with me in that process.
Yeah, and one of the points that I thought were very poignant in these connections is where you connected this project to your own religious background, being raised in Catholicism. And that connection seemed especially important because I was struck by, according to research, how many of these Latina and Latino Mormons came from Catholic backgrounds, which you persuasively argue not just was a point of why they converted to Mormonism, but also then shaped how they experienced Mormonism. Can you explain that or unpack that Mormon Catholic dynamic?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, there's every convert has their story, and so this is not to say like this is the situation for everyone, every Latino saint. But I want to start by saying that especially to those graduate students who might be listening, or even early career scholars, that conversation was always apparent in my research, but it was made more visible in the book because of an early reviewer of the book who just asked a very simple question, which is, how many of these converts are Protestants versus Catholics? And so I went back and I did the research to see how many are they, and then that led me in a path of that's right, Catholicism did come up several times in the interview. So I went back to the interviews and explored those. And so, in terms of the Catholicism, so there was this phrase by one of the people that I interviewed, two people that I interviewed, they were in the same room, and they said "se acopló," or that translates to "it couples together." And using grounded theory, going back to my scholarship, grounded theory lets us, it allows the interviews themselves or the archives or the content of what we're researching tell us what areas to analyze. And so with that grounded theory, it meant that I had to really listen to what people were saying and then move from there. So this idea that Catholicism se acopló, or coupled together, was something that came out of the mouths of LDS members themselves, right? And grounded theory takes a long time, and that's probably why it took from starting this research project in 2014 to publishing now in 2026, right? Unlike other fields, sociology, for example, good ethnography should never be rushed or pumped out fast in order to publish. Slow and steady, it needs to kind of be slow and steady with the aim to understand and truly understand the communities that we work with, and not rush through it. So, and that's why those experiences are laid out throughout the book, where I talk about how folks mentioned their Catholic backgrounds as they talk about converting, or why people think that converting is popular amongst Catholic Latinos.
It's always wonderful to hear a success story about reader number 2 not being an asshole but actually being helpful. So that's great to hear.
Yes.
As part of this pull into Mormonism, I really enjoyed that you dissected this common notion that the reason why they join is the family. And not only do you unpack that the family actually means something different for a lot of these converts, but the more common response that you found was personal fulfillment. Can you explain what you meant by that and why that's significant?
Sure. Well, I start off by recognizing first and foremost everyone I spoke to officially from the church, and I did speak to various members of media people, media representatives from Mesa, as well as folks from headquarters. And a lot of them often said, it's the importance of the family, and the families are forever, are why Latinos are really interested in the faith. So I took that and I kept thinking about that as I was doing research and engaging with the narratives. And yeah, I mean, it's true. Latinos are family oriented. But we already believe in that. We already have that as our cultural basis. So this idea that in the afterlife, we have loved ones that are going to be waiting for arrival. Think like Coco, the music, the movie, not the music. We already have that instilled in culturally. So having a church that promotes the idea of family is forever is nothing new. It just more specifically confirms or affirms what we already know. So what was the real thing? So I started noticing, I always asked folks, if they were converts or if their parents were converts, what made them convert, right? That was kind of an opening question I had. And so many times people talked about personal fulfillment or personal discernment, to be more specific within the LDS language. And so I knew it was going to be really important to highlight, because going back to like the idea of how does one do research, as a Latina researcher myself, I was always questioning deficit models, models that only look at what's wrong with the community or what they need, instead of looking at them through an asset-based analysis that looks at what do they bring to the table. And so that's where I was focusing. And so for me to hear a lot of people talk about reading the Book of Mormon, or finally reading the Bible in a way that they couldn't before, really reaffirmed that asset-based learning that says that Latinos actually love to learn, we love to read, but we may not always have the time to do both, right? And so given more time, or at least given the dedicated time by missionaries, or being asked in sacrament reading meetings to do reading, to talk, or at Relief Society meetings, right? Being asked to reflect on one's personal interpretation of the scriptures provided that time, that space, encouragement really to truly sit with oneself and examine what they believed and why. And so I just, again, it kept coming up more so than the Families Forever. The Families Forever came up, but it was more like not a throwaway line, but it was more like in passing, like, yes, we know that that's the case, but really what made me convert was, personal fulfillment.
Fascinating. Your book is going to do a lot to topple common stereotypes about Mormonism. For instance, despite Mormonism's reputation being primarily a white space, you unpack a very vibrant Latina and Latino community, one that uses their religious faith to reaffirm their ethnic and social distinctions rather than eliminate them. And you also highlight how Latina women were far more likely to build community within their relief societies and congregations than English-speaking congregations. Why do you think it's so important to recognize these realities that don't often get caught in our modern-day perceptions?
I mean, the first and foremost is in terms of diversifying what one thinks of when they think of Mormonism, right? Or Mormon members or LDS members. And yes, obviously the popular rendition is often, white membership is the dominant membership. When in fact, as many of us know, global representation, or not representation, but global converts, the rise of the global church is definitely been going on for over 100 years. In terms of just history alone, the first mission the first mission to Latin America, or in this case, South America, was Chile. And that was in I'm trying to think, 18 before.
50s?
1850s. Yeah, that's right.
Like that, yeah.
But they didn't convert anyone then, right? And so the next big one, the one that actually did result in conversion, was the Mexican mission. And that was, way in the 1860s in some cases, like when they first came out, a few missionaries came out, and I mentioned that in the book, like the first two that came out to, the Arizona region and New Mexico region, in Colorado. But it was 1877 when the first Latino, and I specifically mentioned Latino, not Hispanic. So first Latino to ever be baptized in the LDS church was Jose Epifanio Jesus in Hermosillo, Sonora, which is just the state just south of us here in Arizona. And I mentioned Latino because he, unlike other members that some people cite as important, and they are important members to the church, but those folks are often of Spanish descent, like they came from Spain, whereas Epifanio Jesus was of Latino, like not US, but like Mexican mestizo background, right? And so when I think about that, I think about the fact that for 76% of the LDS is history, 76%, you have had Latino members of the church, right? So if we draw like a pie chart and we put it into quarters, so like 4 parts of the pie, 3 of those 4 pies, like if the pie represents LDS history, 3 of those 4 pies include Latino members. And I think that itself is an important point to recognize, that though yes, white membership is still the majority in terms of power and decision making, the growth and maintenance of Latino LDS members is something that, though recognized, may also be important to recognizing the diversity of the church. So in terms of Latina bonding, right, that was both related to the fact that some of the Latinas were immigrant, not all, and that's a really important point. Not all LDS saints or Latino saints are immigrants. Some are, right, citizens, and or even if they're immigrants, but also, multi-generational. And that came into the frame with the Latinas, like centering Latina experiences. Because I found that, the abuelas, the grandmas, the tias, the aunts, they were the ones that created those leadership opportunities within their family that helped and convinced folks to convert to LDS, the LDS church. And so they held this kind of leadership role within their families that wasn't being recognized. And then they also, I spoke to, going back to granite theory, in terms of like, what were people telling me and how did I use that to analyze? When I spoke informally to white women in the church, they always kind of related some sort of envious kind of approach, or wish that they had the same network and bonds that the Latina, Spanish Relief Society had. And in part, these women talked about, and I actually referenced studies that talk about mean girl kind of attitude sometimes within the mainstream LDS church, where whether it's jabs or competition or, again, the mean girl aspects that even I personally experienced when someone wanted to scare me into silence. And that was really an eye-opener for me because of how the differences are within the Relief Society. And I argue in the book that a lot of the Latinas, because some of them have converted from Catholicism, their families either rejected their conversion or they're just not able to connect with their families in the same way. And so here they are in need of a network, and the LDS Church provides it. And so there's such a more authentic, sincere interaction between these women, and less performative, which is what I got a sense from both the women that I interviewed, the white women that I interviewed, but again, also informally.
Another myth that you burst in this book is the assumption that Mormons are always on the conservative side of politics, because you perform a lot of these interviews and you did a lot of your ethnographic research in the wake of SB 1070, the Arizona law, the Show Me Your Papers law, which, of course, one of the primary proponents was Russell Pierce and other Mormons. So it is, an earned reputation for white Mormons being conservative. But how do these Latino and Latina Latter-day Saints use religion to actually push for progressive change? And what does that do to our overall picture?
Right. Well, what's interesting to me is that, I found at least two different cases of it. I think there was more, but the first case being, as you mentioned, Russell Pierce. He's the author of the Show Me Your Papers law from 2010. That made a big hubbub all over the country, importantly so, right? It was a very dangerous and violent-inducing piece of legislature, and unfortunately, we see that more and more throughout the country now. So it's not limited to Arizona. But during that time, in the wake of him introducing that law or the bill, you had white members who lived in his district who may have done their mission in Latin America, or just plainly did not agree with the way that he was projecting and kind of separating families, right? And seeing them as always already a negative instead of recognizing what they bring to the table as immigrants to this country. So you had white members doing that. You had Latino members who were actively speaking up, saying they don't want these politics to enter their, sacrament meetings. They don't want the politics to make them feel like they don't belong, not just in the church, but obviously in the state. And so you had Latino membership that was locally, carefully, right, strategically, but operating within that space of like, I have a voice and I'm going to use it here. And then you had Latino community organizations who went door to door asking members in Mesa, like, what is it you believe, and does Pierce represent that? And that moment kind of reminds me of LDS tracking, or when one's on a mission and you go door to door. And I think that's maybe unbeknownst to the community orgs, or maybe they knew, that was an interesting point of overlap, because you had these community organizations, one particular who may not have been LDS, but they were in the door to door, the tracking, one could say. They were interviewing LDS members, both white and Latino, and like starting to build that coalition that ended up recalling Russell Pierce, based on this idea of what do we hold dear in terms of our faith, and does he represent that faith? And then also later on, I talked about the next generation, or LDS youth, the children of converts, let's say, who organized together, who had gone to primary, who had gone to young women's or young men's, and had been taught, right, that their faith, their God was a loving God, right, and that prioritized family. And to see then their families, their Latino families, be torn apart because of these politics, right? They utilized the language within the church, the very lessons that they were taught themselves as youth in the church, to say, is this what, right, our Jesus, our God, would promote, right? And so they use the digital media to really question some of that and get people to reflect on their faith, what they actually believe, and how maybe some of the condemnations and violence against immigration or immigrants is not godly, right? Or Jesus would not do. So those are important moments to kind of consider how and why the politics happened, in particular in Mesa, but also in Utah, and now as we see it across the nation.
Dr. Viga, thank you so much again for joining me. Congratulations on the publication of this book. And I encourage everyone to go get a copy. Yeah, hold it up proudly. There it is. The Mormon Barrio. Such a wonderful book. Thanks for spending your time with me, and good luck with going out and promoting this great scholarship.
Thank you so much.
Perhaps one of the best compliments I can give Dr. Viga on this new book is I really wish I had access to this book when I was writing my work, American Zion, because you truly can't understand the broader story of modern Mormonism without these communities and these voices that shed light on dynamics that are often overlooked. But let me highlight a few other strengths that I really appreciated. I really enjoyed the first-person narrative, this connection to the decolonizing process of the grounded theories that Dr. Viga spoke about in the interview, enabled by this ethnographic scholarship that really allows you to take a seat within those interviews and get to know the flesh and bones humans that are experiencing these stories. But going beyond that, I thought she was able to properly mix both this ethnographical and anthropological research along with historical material. I thought the book was very well historically formed, as well as well attuned to the power dynamics at play, always keeping in mind the broader nuances and dynamics that are at work within these communities. I thought the true strength in the book was using these oral histories to capture the lived realities. You can really tell how Dr. Viga, not a Mormon herself, a never-mo as she identified, how she loves these saints and tries to capture faithfully their experiences. And yet she also was able to capture some of the dynamics within those communities, the tensions over gender, race, and class, the generational divides, the same types of issues that are taking place in white religious communities, also found in Latino Mormonism. And then, of course, there's the fascinating connection to Catholicism that I've already touched on a bit, including in the interview. So a few key takeaways. To understand modern Mormonism, we need to unpack on their own terms the vibrant Latina and Latino cultures of the church, and that we should consider grouping Mormonism, especially the Latino communities, within the larger context like American Catholicism, to really tell what makes them unique and how they fit into the broader culture. In conclusion, if we want the full Mormon story, especially in modern-day America, we can't just focus on Salt Lake City, Utah. we also need to look at Mesa, Arizona. And we need to be careful not to flatten out the Mormon experience, that we can capture these vibrant, lively cultures that often go against, even as they work within, the broader institutional structure. And finally, I strongly recommend Dr. Suhei's book, Mormon Barrio, because it's such a fascinating and important saga. And it also fits into a lot of recent books on Mormon social sciences that allow us to get a sense of the community, the Mormon community in the 20-teens. I'm thinking about putting this in conversation with Jana Risa's book, The Next Mormons, about Mormon millennials, with Rosemary Avance's book on Mormons in the digital age, or with Nancy Ross, Jessica Finnegan, and Larissa Cano Kindred's book on Mormon garments that I highlighted a few weeks ago. All these books, based on survey data and ethnographic research, flesh out this story that's often two or one-dimensional into a flesh and blood narrative, listening to those actual voices. And that's what scholarship should do. I hope you found this video useful. If so, please hit the like button, share with others. If you want to follow along these type of nerdy conversations, make sure you're subscribed. And if you want to get back, you can become a member. Remember, history has never been more relevant than it is today. And this type of cutting-edge scholarship is a great reminder why.